I want to delve into listening program especially. Where did it come from? How did you get into that? Tell me your story.
Well, I think like you, Kurt, it's a family story, and it's very personal, but in a different way. So my grandfather started in the field in the 1940s. He was a physiatrist, a doctor of physical medicine and rehabilitation.
Physiatrist.
So physiatry is the field. When he started, he was stationed at Walter Reed in D.C. for 10 years after World War II. And he was doing rehab of injured veterans. So we actually started with injured veterans and doing brain injury rehabilitation. So that's what Granddad did. And he had a brother, Glenn, who was a physical therapist, and they worked in practice together, and had a mentor, which was Dr. Faye. So Faye was kind of one of the early proponents of functional plasticity, kind of the concept of plasticity. And Dr. Faye did brain maps, but he didn't do brain maps as we know them today, and you know them in the EEG neurofeedback field. He did functional brain maps by observing human beings, seeing their movements, seeing their actions, looking at how they responded to sensory input, how they expressed themselves with motor output, and then began to kind of model where lesions were or injuries in the brain. And then working with my granddad and his brother and a large team for years and years, developed a methodology of evaluation that led to something called the Developmental Profile.
Functional maps, can I stop you on?
Yeah.
So they would have people do exercises and kind of map out on a piece of paper of like, this is where your deficits are, maybe there's a brain lesion, maybe there's a...
Is it pons, is it midbrain, is it cortex, and where based on the sensory channel or the motor output channel. Yeah.
That's really cool. And so that was sort of symptoms. I mean, they're following how the person's moving and functioning and interacting in the world and getting a chart of them symptom-based where they are. Yeah. And that led to the development of...
So that led to the development of a motor-based rehab program that became known as the Doman method. And educational psychologist Carl Delicato had joined the team, worked with Granddad and Glenn, and after Faye had left the work. And they developed this developmental profile that went from brainstem to pons to midbrain to cortex, mapping the sensory input channels of auditory response, tactile response, and visual input, and then motor expression through language, through fine motor and gross motor skills. So we have this chart.
And they were influencing those through sort of movement or?
Through movement. So on this chart, they would assess based on the functional assessment what areas of the brain were neurologically disorganized and which were organized. And then that's where you determined where you went to work. And then they developed a system of what they called repatterning of the brain. So it would retrain the brain based on a model of neuroplasticity, based on doing certain exercises with specific frequency, intensity, and duration, right? So repetition in order to produce change. And that became kind of the foundation of the family work, starting with adult rehab, but then working with kids. Working with kids with organic and traumatic brain injury, with different developmental disorders on the autism spectrum, Down syndrome, kind of name a label across the board. And that really became the focus of the family work going through the 50s and the 60s and on to today.